Our next speaker is Chris Cuvelier, and he is one of the most persistent, creative, constantly evolving entrepreneurs that I know. From his early use of acai as the basis for a line of energy smoothies under his brand Zola, to creative partnerships with more mature companies, to extending his brand into larger platforms, understanding the power of new ingredients and form factors to take Zola into coconut water, as well as creatively financing it all over the years, he's always proven himself to be a nimble and inspirational operator. Plus, the guy surfs a lot. So it wasn't that much of a surprise when he called me a little less than a year ago to tell me that, hey, he wanted to talk about some changes that had happened with the company. And the next thing you know, Chris Cuvelier, Jungleberry merchant, has started developing products around a whole new superfood, cannabis. I was very happy for him and for me, not because I thought he was going to start sending me all kinds of products. I'm still waiting. But actually because I knew that when he reported back to me from inside Caliva, his new vertically integrated employer, that he'd have a lot of great insight for me on the transition from food and beverage to cannabis entrepreneur. The product development process, the branding process, the ins and outs, the hunt for cash, the battle to brand and distribute, and that as someone who has a lot of conference time to fill, I could throw him under the bus as well. So for those entrepreneurs who are here from the brand side, who are thinking that it's time to scratch that itch, Chris is here to tell us what he's seeing. The good, the bad, the ugly. And he's also here to give the folks coming from the cannabis world thoughts on opening it up to food and beverage entrepreneurs like himself. So please welcome Chris Cuvelier, the head of Beverage for Caliva.
Thank you, Jeff, and good morning. Two things in that intro I need to respond to. One, I think you just made a reference that all surfers smoke weed, right? Is that accurate? Is that the reference you were making? All right, not all. And secondly, I am happy to give you a goodie bag. Just let me tour you in Caliva, so open invitation. I just can't ship it to the East Coast, so come on out and I'll send you home with some good Caliva goodies. As Jeff said, my name is Chris Cuvelier. I am the head of beverage at Caliva. And I'm also on the executive team. And when Jeff asked me to come speak and tell the story, I was pretty excited. And before I jump into this, with a show of hands, how many people here are in the cannabis industry today directly? Okay, great. And then how many of you want to get into the cannabis industry? Couple, okay. Well, the cannabis industry is pretty amazing. It's incredibly dynamic. It might be one of the most exciting ingredients in CPG in the last probably 10, 20 years. And certainly in my lifetime, I think it's one of the bigger opportunities. We're seeing new states legalize cannabis. We're seeing product innovation starting to ramp up. As the last speaker and Jeff were talking about, the cannabis markets are a little bit crazy, certainly on the public side. But this industry is not easy, and it's not for the faint of heart. So what I'm going to take you through today is where we came from Beverage, and how I wound up at Caliva, and how we are out there building the most trusted name in cannabis. So a little bit about background, and I won't go too terribly deep here, but as Jeff mentioned, we got started with acai. So we were the world's first packaged acai juice. We launched that back in 2002. I went down and set up our supply chain. I had started the business with 2 other partners, and we grew that business from $250,000 our first year to about $500,000 the next, $750,000, $1.7 million, $3.4 million. And in 2006, we got our first investment capital from Immigrant Capital out of New York. We continued to grow the business into 2010 and 2011. And at that point, the acai category got very fragmented. So the messaging was not clear. It got very diluted. So people were talking about acai for antioxidants, omega fatty acids, healthy hair and skin. And then the pill companies came in, got people's credit cards, and were direct shipping, claiming acai was great for energy and weight loss, which really was not true. So we wound up, as Jeff mentioned, pivoting the brand, and we took our brand positioning from Zola Brazilian Superfruits, and we went into Zola Fruits of the World. And the way we did that is we went to Thailand and realized that the best tasting coconuts were coming out of that region. And I knew that personally because as I served and was doing our supply chain work down in Brazil, I would often drink coconuts to recover, but they were very salty. So we built the brand and continued to drive growth and launch coconut water, which is a display picture there on the right, into the United States. In 2016, we caught the attention of a private equity firm called Karp Riley. I was introduced to Alan Karp of Karp Riley, and Karp Riley is a private equity growth company that provides growth capital out of the East Coast. And so instead of doing a minority investment in Zola, they wound up buying the entire company. And it was very interesting for me because I stayed on as CEO to continue to grow the brand. So they put a chunk of capital on our balance sheet, and what we did, and I will be tying this to cannabis here pretty quickly for you, but what we did is we did some consumer research, and at that point we were in 2 categories, acai juice and coconut water. And what we realized is most people knew us for our coconut water business because it was about 3 times bigger than our acai business. So in that consumer research, we decided that we were going to double down. And as we built our new logo with the icon there on the left, we wanted to better tell a story of plant-powered hydration to help you live inspired. So we rolled that out in our new packaging in 2017. While we were doing that, we were starting to see the hemp CBD market get some traction, and we started to get some early signs that things in the regulatory framework would be changing. I've been tracking the cannabis industry for probably 7 or 8 years, had multiple business plans written, had some capital that wanted to line up and invest in it. And in 2017, I spoke with Alan Karp on our board, and we said, Zola is perfectly positioned to get into hemp CBD. We're already about plant-based solutions. We had distribution in about 7,000 accounts around the country, and we already had a team, and we were ready to go. 2018, October, I was speaking at a conference very similar to this in Las Vegas, about 150 beverage executives, and I was partnered with Dennis O'Malley, who is the CEO of Caliva. So I got up and spoke about coconut water disrupting the sports drink market. Spent about 15 minutes talking about that, and then Dennis got up and talked about cannabis disrupting pretty much everything from alcohol to opioids to anything functional, from sleep, pain relief, etc. And it was fascinating for me because the entire crowd was just completely glued in. And so as we sat up there as a 2-person panel with the moderator, 2 people out of the crowd said, Dennis, why wouldn't someone like you and Chris get together? You clearly have a big cannabis industry and business. Clearly Chris knows a lot about beverage. And Dennis looked over at me and smiled and said, that's a good idea, and just stopped. So after that, Dennis and I got along pretty well. We sat down and met after the event, and he invited me to come see Caliva and do the tour. So this is definitely Dennis's move. He loves to give the tour because Caliva has a pretty fantastic facility. The business was started in 2015, which in the scheme of things really was not that long ago. And the company was started by Rich Brown, who owned a 160,000 square foot facility in San Jose, California. It got licensed in the green zone, and what started with a $2 million investment of his own capital quickly grew to 50. And what they did is they became fully licensed and fully vertically integrated. So we got every single license that you need, from grow to oil extraction to distribution. And so today there are 13 grow rooms. We have oil extraction on site, we have product manufacturing on site, and in the front of it, we have a dispensary, which that picture on the left is a little slice of. And that dispensary was one of the #1 dispensaries in the country in 2016. So after that tour, we sat down and I started to learn a little bit more about the back-end engine, and this is what got me very excited, because what I realized in the state of California, where distribution is very limited, in this state there's about 600, maybe 700 licensed dispensaries. Caliva had 250 of those being distributed through a DSD network, meaning there was 10 to 12 salespeople in vans driving around the state selling a portfolio of Caliva products to the other dispensaries. And I thought that was unbelievable and a huge competitive advantage. The other thing I saw was online ordering. So people would go into Caliva.com, hundreds and hundreds of orders being processed a day and either being fulfilled through Ease, which is a distribution partner of ours, or through our own delivery system. Right then, they were also closing a $75 million Series A round. And they had brought on notable investors like Joe Montana, as well as Carol Bartz, who was the former CEO of Yahoo and is now actually the chairman of our board. So I went away from this thing completely impressed and really blown away. I'd never been under the hood of a cannabis company like that. In less than a week, I actually wrote the last check in that A round and invested my own money. And as part of that sit down with Dennis, we talked about Beverage. Dennis believed strongly that cannabis was going to be growing in the health and wellness space, and that Beverage had an opportunity to really bring more consumers into the category as things grew. And there's a lot of articles out there talking about these huge numbers. One of them was Forbes earlier this year in April, talking about it going to be $1 billion industry. So we've seen all the hype, but what I looked at is the fundamentals, and could this really happen? And so what Dennis and I talked about was beverages are really consumed by everyone every single day. That's why it's a $200 billion industry. I looked at beverages as a very healthy way to consume cannabis, especially for those people that don't smoke. It's very easy to have a clean label, very easy to combine with functional ingredients. And we thought that beverage really could be one of the ways you could bring more people into the category through plant-based solutions. And then as they looked for other alternatives for pain relief and other things that they needed in their daily lives, that cannabis could be a great plant-based solution for that. So I started consulting in November 2018, dove in pretty quickly. The first thing I did is I really looked at big beverage categories and said, where does cannabis make sense? We started talking with a lot of the emulsion companies, the folks at Source, who are one of the sponsors here at this conference, and really trying to learn about how do you take cannabis oil and put it in a beverage, because it's hard, right? You know the adage that oil and water don't mix. And so I really need to understand the technology of how do we create a great consumer experience. So then it was really understanding the challenges, the opportunities, the categories, et cetera. And the more I got involved and the more I learned, the more I realized this is going to be a huge opportunity, both in hemp CBD and in THC. So I planted a seed with Dennis about a month in. And that seed was, how do we do more of a formal partnership? What I suggested was there a way to work together more than a consultant? And I said, I think you should acquire Zola. So that seed grew. The initial reaction was, there's no way with the regulatory framework to make that happen. And a month later, the more I got into the company, Dennis came back to me and said, Chris, are you still open to a potential acquisition? Because I think that's a very interesting idea. And I said, sure, I think that would be fantastic. And so the reason this made sense was both Caliva and Zola believed in cannabis as a plant-based solution. Together, we have a huge and unique opportunity to build a portfolio of beverage brands, both in THC and hemp CBD, to build authenticity in the cannabis channel, leveraging our distribution, and then taking that to the mainstream market. And then third, Zola is able to operate as a separate hemp CBD division with our own team, our own distribution, our own brand, and we could accelerate getting into the category quickly. So our approach to all this really is, one is build a portfolio of in-house beverages to target multiple consumer groups with different products for different uses occasions. And this is something at Caliva we were already doing. So California has 35% of the total US cannabis volume. And within that product set, flower is by far the number one product category. So down at the bottom, you can see some of the Caliva in-house brands like Dog Walkers, Reef Leaf, Deli, Bad Apple, and actually Caliva brand. And so with having different flower at different price points, targeting different consumer groups, that has led to Caliva being the number one flower in terms of dollars sold in the state of California. So the way I looked at this is if we're going to build a portfolio of great beverages, we would need to make sure we build the great beverage first, then infuse it with cannabis, and then infuse it with hemp CBD. And then lastly, because of our relationships with lobbyists, we're able to be a resource for our retail and distribution partners on some of the regulatory framework, which is a big thing in the industry. So getting to the meat of this, what Jeff and I were talking about a few weeks ago is it just easy enough to take a CPG or a beverage playbook and plug this into cannabis? And everyone said, look, it's a fairly hard category. And after being into it for a year, I really now understand why. In a typical beverage playbook, you go out there, you build amazing products. You create engaging and packaging that is arresting on shelf. You focus on your distribution to build density. You drive marketing to build trial and awareness and repeat sales. And then you get paid, right? Businesses need to be able to collect on the revenue. But when you really take that playbook and you look at the cannabis reality, it's really taking an existing playbook and making sure that you can flex your agility muscle and adapt. Because when you're trying to build amazing products, there's very limited manufacturing in THC and with hemp CBD. So for THC, we decided we would build a beverage manufacturing under roof at Caliva and control that quality in-house, which helps us build ourselves as one of the most trusted brands in cannabis. The second is, for hemp CBD, is trying to find co-packers that had scale, that had the right quality systems in place that we could build into immediately, and then as the products take off, we can service the market as we grow. From a packaging standpoint, pretty simple, right? We know a lot of packaging people, being in the beverage industry for 18 years. Even with where cannabis is today in the public persona, there are a lot of packaging suppliers that said, we will not sell you packaging. So one of the companies that we've worked with 10 years said, you absolutely cannot, and in fact, this bottle that you want to use, we have a code on it, and if we find that code and market with cannabis, we're coming after you. It's like, what does coming after us mean? You're going to sue me for putting cannabis beverages in your bottle? So interesting comment, but also showing just how the cannabis reality is you can't just go buy any form factor you want and put a beverage in it, and you also don't have every co-packing option you want, so it's a limiting factor. From distribution, THC distribution is pretty spotty. There's several options here in the state of California, but it's tough from a service standpoint, and it's tough collecting some of that cash. So what we were able to do, or we're about to be able to do with our THC beverages, is to leverage internal DSD. So we can put it in the stores that we distribute to, just based on that vertical integration and having that DSD network. And then from a CBD standpoint, obviously we have a lot of contacts being in the beverage industry for the last 18 years. Marketing for awareness and trial, right? You want to do SEO advertising on Google, advertise on Facebook. There's a lot of things you cannot do from a marketing perspective that is also incredibly limiting. So the way we're approaching that is, how do we focus on things that work that give us back sustainable ROI? As the last speaker was talking about, a lot of cannabis companies are burning through tons of cash, which is one of the things that is impacting valuations, where the hype build these valuations into billions of dollars. But when you have a company that might be generating $80 million in annual revenue and $100 million in negative EBITDA, there's no way that can be a multi-billion dollar valuation. That's crazy. So we look at it as focusing on sustainable ROI and then to accelerate some of the successful tactics that we're using. And last, I mentioned getting paid, right? So banking's still illegal for both cannabis and hemp. There seems to be some things that are starting to break now, but the industry has to deal a lot in cash, which is very difficult, and it adds a lot of complexity to the business. And then last, leveraging relationships and partnerships to test different types of payment systems, which we're engaging in doing. And then specifically with beverages, also a lot of challenges within the industry. So the first wave of cannabis beverages that came in were pretty poor. And I think that really stems on some of the limited manufacturing. So these beverages had very, very high sugar contents typically to hide the flavor of the cannabis, which is pretty bitter. And then the quality would be low with preservatives. So from our perspective, the opportunity there is really leveraging formula expertise to be able to go pursue that philosophy of building a great beverage first and then infuse it with cannabis. The second is unreliable dosing. So the experience is really not consistent. And if you have varying levels of THC, it's hard to give the consumer what they need, which is a great consumer experience. So manufacturing capabilities and doing that in-house is a great way to mitigate that. The other one is slow onset. So technology has been improving with emulsion, which is taking the cannabinoids and getting them into your system through different techniques, whether it's nano-emulsion and increasing bioavailability. But when you have something that takes 45 minutes to hit you, the reaction is to go take another one or drink another one, and then you're sitting on the couch for 8 hours, which is not good for anybody. Second is offset, right? So not only do you not want to be couched for 8 hours, but if you look at alcohol consumption, right? You go have a shot of tequila or a beer or a glass of wine, you know it's going to hit you in 10 minutes. You also know it's going to start to go back down after 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. Selfishly, right, you want to be able to mimic that experience within cannabis so it mirrors alcohol because it matches up with the consumer behavior. The selfish part is you also don't want to sell one beverage to someone and have them have an experience for 7 or 8 hours. You want that offset to be short so you can continue to sell more product. And then lastly is consumer access. With only 700 doors in California, one of Jeff's questions to the last speaker was around building brands. It's pretty hard to build a brand in just 700 doors, and that's assuming you get into every single licensed dispensary in the state. So a lot of this is really building brands and betting on the come. So as you look at where does cannabis go as legalization happens on a national basis, will we see cannabis products in Whole Foods and Safeway one day? Maybe, right? I believe that could happen. I'm not sure it's going to happen the next year or two, but I think within the next 10 years we'll see that. And I know that all the retailers certainly would love to see that happen. And to that end, you're starting to see retailers getting into the business at scale. You're not seeing any of the big retailers bringing hemp CBD in beverages or in edibles. It's still mostly independents. They're still pretty nervous if they're national companies, just based on the FDA rulings. But what you are seeing is in companies like Safeway. I actually took this picture in my local Safeway in Half Moon Bay here in Northern California. They're getting into hemp. It's being positioned as wellness, and they are typically topicals and creams and pain relief type products. And then I also took this picture driving down the highway near my office on the right of CBS. CVS getting into full spectrum hemp oil products. So our view of it today is that it's coming. It's an exciting industry. Again, not for the faint of heart. But if you're able to navigate these waters, we think that it's an amazing category to play in, and very excited to be a part of it. Thank you.
Well, we're excited to have you as part of it. Thank you very much for bringing us. What's your day-to-day like?
Man, it changes every single day. So right now, I'm working with our agencies on packaging. Mm-hmm. I am driving product development and formulation. I'm talking with different emulsion companies and trying to understand the latest and best technology. We are getting prep for distribution of our hemp-based CBD products in the mainstream market. We're building out a team of people to do that, and that's what I'm doing in Beverage at Caliva.
Right.
Second part is we still have an existing business in Zola, so I have P&L responsibility for that, and I'm a member of the executive team. So this week, I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning on Monday, traveling to a co-packer for production. Spent 2 days there.
Production of
a new product that we're launching in 3 weeks.
Okay, for Zola or for Caliva?
It's a Caliva product. It's a new brand that will be one of our first portfolio brands in the hemp CBD side to start.
Okay. Are you infusing Zola?
Yes, we will. So if you go back to that slide I showed about the logo, it's perfectly suited to go not only into hemp CBD, but going into THC. So I am now simultaneously working on 3 different branded products. One which we just manufactured, one will be Zola, and we have a new one coming down the pike for late Q1 2020.
So can we go a little deeper, not necessarily letting cats out of bags, but a little bit deeper into the process of taking an existing brand and what you're thinking about when you infuse it in terms of what it's going to do to that brand?
Yep. Yeah, so that's an interesting question because I don't think that any brand can just go out there and start infusing THC and hemp CBD. And I think as the regulatory environment changes in the mainstream market, you're going to see a ton of brands add CBD as a line extension. Some of that will work and some of that won't. I believe beverage is really about authenticity. It's why you don't see brands that can often cut across multiple categories, such as making it up coffee, sparkling water, protein, and keto. These typically have brands that own these verticals and build in that authenticity. What we have at Zola is that plant-based product, and that's where the brand has been built. So for us to add CBD into something that's already plant-based, and if you look at our logo, right, with the leaves and the water and the person with the arms up living inspired, CBD fits perfectly into that.
He's almost a plant man.
The plant man, that's right. Like it.
So let's pull out for a sec, talk about the overall marketplace. You know, we heard it from Ricardo, we've heard it from the organization that you're in. You've got salves. I can't say salves.
Is that how you say it, salves?
Smokables, non-ingestible products. What are you guys projecting as the overall mix of product and the role of food and beverage within that?
Yeah, so today in California, flowers is the number one category, and vapes is another huge category. So with a lot of the health issues that are happening in vapes and some of the lack of testing, I think there's a lot of uncertainty in that category, and we're seeing some declines there. We look at the business as 2 major buckets, and it's segmented more than this, but the 2 major buckets would be connoisseurs, right? Cannabis connoisseurs that are in the market. They're the ones that are traditionally smoking the product. They know what strains they want. They know how it's going to impact them. They use different strains for different occasions. Where we see the growth is in the canna curious. It's people that want to learn about cannabis, whether that's a non-psychoactive hemp CBD product or whether that's a cannabis product that is psychoactive that is a plant-based solution. So within that canna curious, we see other things like salves, edibles, beverages, other form factors that are available that can bring them into the category in a either more discreet way if there's still some stigma about it, or that fits better in their lifestyle. And then as they learn about cannabis as a plant-based solution, we have multiple options for that. And the entire industry is building more options for that. So that's where we believe a lot of the growth is going to come, is from some of these new products like beverages and edibles. But at the end of the day, the key really is education to go after that canna-curious market, because when you go talk to retailers, you go talk to consumers. I just read an article that 72% of the consumers in the United States have now heard of CBD, but they don't know the difference between marijuana and hemp and what are the differences there. People don't know that if you have hemp CBD that you're not going to fail a drug test. So it's going to be an interesting journey to get people there, but education is really going to be one of those keys.
Absolutely. And so in terms of branding, what are you doing to educate?
So
Let's take it back to Zola, for example.
So I'll speak to two sides, right? So on the cannabis side, right, our whole goal is to, be the most trusted name in cannabis. So for us, it's about trying to educate our existing customers and new customers coming in the door about what these products do. So for example, in our retail location, we don't call those people bud tenders, we call them wellness consultants. And they are geared to answer questions. And so if you look at things like our website and you look at different things, we try to funnel down to why are you here? What got you in the door? And then these people are trained to teach them and answer very, very specific questions. And then we roll them to ordering online and delivering that directly to them.
So online is a big way of getting these people educated.
Yeah, it's every touch point you have, whether that's your delivery driver being educating, being able to talk about the product, it's the wellness consultants being able to educate that, and then packaging. On packaging, for example, it's somewhat of a challenge. As you asked about Zola, especially on that side of it, because the regulatory environment is still rapidly changing and incredibly dynamic. Even this week, the FDA is sending letters out to brands, cracking down, and what they're going after brands is for people that are making claims. And so, how do you educate a consumer when you can't say things like relaxation and you can't make any types of claims about the functional benefits? So it's really around formulation. How do you get these messages, perhaps through another functional ingredient that might be grass, might have some science behind it, so you can make that claim not against CBD, but about some of the other functional products of that to work through that.
Don't you also run into issues of brand representatives saying the wrong thing?
You can. So it's about training. So we just launched a store called Well by Caliva in San Carlos, which is in Northern California, and there's 0 THC products there. So the way we think about our business is, first and foremost, we're a cannabis company, and we look at hemp CBD as a non-psychoactive plant-based ingredient that can bring people in the category, and it goes back to education. So this retail store has third-party hemp CBD products. We are building Well by Caliva products that will be there, and those wellness consultants are absolutely trained to teach people the difference. So although we don't have cannabis products there to sell them, if they're asking about that, we can direct them to the website and have them understand the difference of hemp and sell them products there on the spot and educate them about cannabis at the same time. So it's these one-on-one touch points, it's web, and it's packaging.
Let's talk about your strategic stance, knowing that the ground can go, it's like you're living in Southern California, right?
Sure.
Can go out from underneath you at any time. Are you guys prepared for federal legalization? And are you prepared for federal bans?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because if you go look at a lot of the people that have got into the hemp beverages, for example, on their websites, it's legal in all these states, in every state, and that's just not true. So the way that we've positioned this is taking a page out of the Beverage playbook is we're not looking at this, let's go national right out of the gate. That's not a good play in beverage to start with, right? You get diluted, you need to build some density, you need to build a success story, test, learn, improve, iterate, and then scale. So we're being very hyper-focused in how we're launching. But what we have is plan A, plan B, plan C. We have connections into things at the FDA. We're very involved in AB 228, which is the ruling or the bill in the state of California that will legalize hemp CBD in food and beverage. So we are lined up with different things, but even if it goes national, that doesn't mean that everyone should jump in and go national. There's so many brands that have done that and failed in beverage overall, so we're going to take a much more strategic approach.
One last quick question. There's slotting fees in cannabis. Did you think you were done with them already?
Yeah, so there are actually slotting fees within cannabis in the dispensaries, which talking to Sean Peters, who is our VP of sales that runs, we call it our wholesale business, and they sell Caliva products into the other dispensaries. you're paying for that shelf space. And now in our dispensary, where we sell not only our own brands, but we sell other brands like Moxie Mints and different gummies and some of the different other top brands in the space, we are charging for that. In the mainstream market, we're not seeing that very much yet because it's mostly independents. The big guys are the ones that are typically charging the slotting fees, but I'm sure that's coming as well.
And is this part of your trade spend budget?
Yeah, you have to build it in. So, we see some of the bigger companies coming in slowly, but we believe it's still going to take some time in the mainstream market. So I don't think this is a weeks or several months. I think it's more many months to maybe even a year. And to your point, it could even get shut down. We don't know. Again, the last speaker made the comment of, the toothpaste is already out of the tube. I tend to believe that that's the case. There's huge consumer demand. We're seeing all the right directional things happen for it to be legalized in the right way in hemp CBD on a federal level. But you don't know. And that's, again, part of navigating and taking a beverage, an existing CPG playbook, and modifying that for cannabis. It is having these other strategies lined up. So if A happens, we do B.
How do you stay cool with all of it going on?
I have a huge employee discount for cannabis products. I'm not a huge smoker. Maybe 2-3 times a year for me. But what I have found is my cannabis, my actual psychoactive THC consumption has gone up. And what I like, for example, is we have a brand called Moxie Mints that we manufacture and distribute exclusively in the state. And so a little mint that has a blend of CBD and THC, like things like that are fantastic. So I'm substituting a little bit of that for my favorite bourbon sometimes. In fact, we had a sidebar story. We had a big meeting that I was one of 3 people presenting to a significant group and 4 or 5 people on our board, or not our board, on our executive team in the meeting. And I just had hip surgery 6 weeks ago. And so my hip was flaring up a little bit, and so I popped a CBD Moxie Mint. And about 5 minutes before the meeting, I'm like, oh, cool, I'm getting a little pain relief. And all of a sudden, it kind of started ramping up a little bit. And I looked at the pack, and I was like, oh, shit, this was a THC CBD blend, and I'm kind of a lightweight, so it was only 5 milligrams. But let's just say I was very mellow and really felt like my speaking had slowed down. I was asking some of my colleagues, like, hey, how'd that go? And they're like, man, you crushed it. That was awesome. I'm like, what, could you tell I was high? And they're like, you were high? And I was like, yeah, I was high. So that was rather interesting.
Yeah, so there's an appropriate quote from Scarface here that one might want to consider, which is, don't get high on your own supply, particularly when meeting with investors.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It was done by accident, but it made for a interesting experience and certainly a fun story.
Well, thanks for sharing your interesting experience with us.
Thanks, bud.
Great to have you.